You're listening to Shift, Human First Financial Guidance with Ross Marino.
Today, we are shifting the conversation with Andrew Hatherley. Andrew is the founder of Transcend Retirement and the host of the Gray Divorce podcast. And Andrew will be speaking at Shift 2024. Hello, Andrew.
Hey, Ross. Glad to be here.
So glad to have you on the show. You have a topic that is so important to talk about, needs to be talked about on podcasts, also needs to be part of any human first type of conference out there. And you're going to talk about gray divorce. And the first question that I want to ask about gray divorce, something I've been thinking about, is it just being talked about more frequently because people like to read about it and it seems like something we haven't heard of? Or is it actually increasing dramatically?
It is increasing, Ross. I refer people to a study put out by Susan Brown and Yifan Lin back in 2012. It's an article called The Gray Divorce Revolution. And they did some pretty deep academic research on the increased rates of gray divorce. And as life would have it, I became a participant in the phenomenon only 3 years later in 2014, 2015, at the age of 52. So gray divorce is generally defined as divorce over the age of 50, hence the gray. But what they found in studying the rates of divorce from 1990 to 2010 was that among U.S. adults aged 50 and older, the divorce rate had roughly doubled for that group, and it even tripled for the 65 and older group. Just to give you an idea, in 1990, I think it's 8.7% of all people divorcing were over the age of 50, and by 2019, it was 36%, so slightly over a third of all people getting divorced were over the age of 50. The majority are still under 50, but the increases are really happening in the older population, 50 plus, and even more so in the 65 and up group.
That's a pretty amazing jump when you think about it statistically. So it begs the question, did something change? Is there a cause now that wasn't around before? I mean, what do you think's causing all the gray divorce?
Well, I think I've kind of narrowed it down to 5 key issues. And I think the first would be simply the acceptability generally of divorce in society. If we go back to the 60s, even 70s, it might have been more frowned upon socially. Certainly, the religious grounds against divorce may have lightened as well. But as this population has gotten older, they've seen changes in society that maybe when they were in their 20s and 30s, can't get divorced. But by the time they reach their 60s, 70s, and I'm even seeing people in their 80s, they realize that it's no longer such a taboo as it used to be. And another thing is so many people over the age of 50, 60, 70, they're in the second and third marriages. And it's an interesting phenomenon, but the divorce rates are higher for second and third marriages than they are even for first marriages. I'm always kind of trying to dig a little bit as to why that's so, but it's pretty well documented. So with the older people coming out of second and third marriages as they get older, and of course longevity, as people live longer, it becomes more likely that the marriage will break up, not solely due to the death of a partner, but also the choice of one partner to leave the marriage. And when we're talking about the choice to leave the marriage, I think of 2 other contributing factors. One is the increased economic independence of women. Certainly, women have enjoyed tremendous strides over the last 50 years, even the last 30 years, in terms of economic well-being. So increasingly, they have more economic wherewithal to make that decision to become independent. And I think a 5th point that maybe isn't as discussed as much is the personal development ethos or industry even in society. We can't go to a bookstore without seeing stacks of books on personal development, being the best you, that sort of thing. That, I mean, we had it 20, 30 years ago with Anthony Robbins, but now, I mean, we've got Brené Brown, Simon Sinek, Mel Brown. I mean, there's so much. And when people are breathing this in the oxygen, this idea of, you can do more with your life, you can be happier, and you've got more life to live because of life expectancy. People are saying, okay, maybe I need to make the decision to, change things up a little bit. I've only got, if I've got 20 or 30 years left, let's make them a really good 20 or 30 years, and perhaps better than the 50 or 60 I've lived already. So I think those are kind of the key points I look at when asked, why are we seeing increased rates of divorce in later life?
You mentioned people in their 20s, and I'd imagine getting divorced in your 50s and 60s has quite a few differences than someone in their 20s. Can you talk about maybe the differences in that?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily a pleasurable experience at any stage in life, but I've seen one writer refer to it as a life quake for somebody who's perhaps been in a marriage for a very long time, or had plans for retirement, or to be with a person for a very long time. It's a major disruption to their lives, and it's coming later in life. As a financial advisor, we know that there's less time to recover financially. For somebody in their 20s or 30s, it's time in the market, not timing the market. Well, obviously, somebody who's seeing half of their not a net income, half of their net worth potentially go away as assets are split 50-50 or thereabouts. They've got much less time than someone in their 20s and 30s to rebuild and to put that nest egg back together. So the importance of getting the decisions right while going through the divorce process, and having a financial planning hat on while going through the divorce process is very important. I know when I was going through my divorce, I was hearing all sorts of scary things like, oh, you're going to have to work for the rest of your life now. Well, I had planned to retire at 60. I didn't fancy going to the office at 85. So this can be a very traumatic thing to hear and to go through. But funnily enough, I found that I actually grew from that. And I think older people have a much more ability to grow and change and develop than they think they do. And so when I was going through this, and I realized my vision of retirement would change, getting divorced at 52, I began to think, well, how can we change it, but change it for the better? And if I want to continue working past 60 or 65, maybe that's a good thing. And so I started doing a lot of research about retirement. And of course, this is in the minds of people who are divorcing later in life because they're thinking about retirement. And, maybe they're balancing different ways of approaching retirement, doing something different, or what I like to say is emphasizing your strengths and the things that bring you energy. And so what I found was, I'm quite happy not retiring at 60. In matter of fact, I just turned 60. I'm doing more at 60 in terms of presentations and getting out and educating people about the finances of gray divorce and financial planning in a much different way than I was 10, 15 years ago. And it's exciting, and it brings me energy. And so I've rethought, well, maybe it's not so much retiring from work, but it's making work more a part of my authentic self, and doing and emphasizing some of the strengths that I have, so that the work I have is more profound, more meaningful, and more potentially inspirational to other people. So it's quite a bit different for older people. We've got those financial issues, and The social issues are very, very important as well. For good and for bad, but typically your social bonds that have been established over decades as opposed to 5-10 years are being frayed, and that can be quite a shock to the system, and hopefully we can be open and learn as to how we can deal with that shock. So yeah, it's quite a bit different.
There's differences also in the experience of divorce for men and for women. And I know that's part of your presentation. You'll talk about that at Shift in 2024. And I'm sure on your podcast, you've gone over it many times. How about if you give a kind of just a short contrast of, in general, divorce, how it impacts women and how it impacts men in the gray divorce world?
My research has shown, and I recently read a really good book by Joyce Crowley about gray divorce, and she pinpoints it. Women tend to experience more of an economic penalty in divorce than men. Now, having said that, men don't come out of divorce any better than they were beforehand. On the economic front, you're seeing half of your net worth being split, and essentially more expenses because you're now supporting two households. But Brown and Lynn, who was academics from Bowling Green University, they did a study last year about the economic impact of gray divorce, and they showed that typically the woman's standard of living drops by about 45%, and the man's typically drops by about 25%. Now, that's not to say men don't have, as I said, economic consequences as well, but typically it tends to hit women a little harder. What's interesting is, though, on the social front, divorce tends to hit men a little harder. So we have, on one hand, the economic penalty of divorce, and on the other hand, the no less important social penalty of divorce. And, typically in a marriage, not always the case, I don't want to generalize too much, but certainly a lot of research has been done on this, is that the wife tends to be the social organizer in the household. And the man goes, goes along for the ride, said, "Oh, we're doing this weekend with the Petersons." So, okay, but when after divorce, that kind of social coordination falls to the wayside. Also, men's relationship with the adult children tends to be more harshly hit, and that may be because of maternal bonds or any number of things that may be due to the reason for the divorce. But the male spouse's bonds with the adult children and friends tends to be a little bit more frayed. And men, for whatever reason, and I think it might have something to do with our nature and our biology, is that we find it more difficult to make friends with other men later in life. A lot of research has been done about loneliness, and while loneliness certainly affects women, it does appear to be more pronounced among men, who just seem to have more difficulty making male friends. So when I look at the impacts of divorce and some of the things that we try to overcome or work against in a positive way, and I like to incorporate positive psychology in this, is certainly the economic impact, which tends to be more profound for women, and the social impact, which tends to be more profound for men.
Final question for you. What does human first financial guidance mean to you?
Well, humans are first. I always I like the Harvard study, the Harvard study of adult development, which started way back in the 30s, and I think they came out with some new research for it within the last couple of years. But it showed that the most important things to a healthy, long, contented life was relationships. Money's important, obviously. We need to put food on the table, and we need to have shelter. But once we get past those kind of basic necessities of life, it's people, it's humans first, and it's relationships which make us happy and content in life. And so that's what I think when I think human first, and that's why my financial advisory practice and my divorce practice, I try to incorporate the human psychological element as much as the financial. Of course, I am a financial planner, financial advisor, but I think money should be the tool to help us find that contented, meaningful, purposeful life. We should use money as a tool and not see money as an end in itself, particularly when it comes to comparisons with others or shows of ostentatious shows of richness. And I notice I distinguish between richness and wealth. There's quite a distinction there. So I think ultimately we're not islands with a pile of cash. We are people, and that money should be serving us.
Appreciate that answer. I know you're on the agenda, and we look forward to seeing you at Shift 2024. And Andrew, thanks for being on the show today.
I really look forward to it. I'm really excited about presenting at Shift 2024. It's my favorite conference.
Thank you for listening to Shift with Ross Marino. Please visit humanfirst.live to learn more. This show is for general information purposes only and is not intended to provide recommendations or advice. Speak with a legal, tax, or financial advisor before making any decisions. Past performance references are historical and do not guarantee future results.